There is a silent, brutal form of failure that nobody will ever pity you for. It is not the loss to a superior opponent, and it is not bad luck. It is the crushing reality of losing to yourself. You had the tools. The preparation was flawless. The window was open. But in a 30-second window, a minor setback triggered something inside you, and the man capable of winning simply vanished. What replaced him was a reactive defensive shadow operating on a script you never wrote. You know this version. It arrives without permission and costs you opportunities you can never claw back. Miyamoto Musashi taught that there is nothing outside of yourself that can ever enable you to get better, stronger, richer, or quicker. Most people waste years trying to patch the symptoms, building new habits or systems, without ever naming the actual disease, an ungoverned inner state. Today we close that gap. We will follow the journey of Kenji, a young warrior who possessed elite technique but lacked a stable ground, and the 3 precise practices he used to master his internal sovereignty. But before he could master anything, he had to be broken down by a monk who saw straight through his greatest illusion. Let us begin. Kyoto, 1632. Kenji entered the Daitokuji temple not seeking enlightenment, but searching for a cure. He had been sent by his master, Yagyu Munenori, with a brutal diagnosis. Tell the monk what happens to you when the steel becomes real. At 26, Kenji was a prodigy. His technical form was flawless. His speed was feared in every dojo in the province. In controlled training, he was a titan. But when the stakes shifted from wooden practice swords to live blades, something fundamental shattered. It was not a lack of courage or a failure of muscle memory. It was a sudden contraction of the soul. In the exact moment he needed to be. Fluid, he became a prisoner of his own internal tension. Kenji explained this to Takuan Soho. The monk listened in a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. "You have named the symptoms," Takuan said eventually, "but you are still missing the core disease." Kenji waited, his breath shallow. "You believe your slow reactions and clouded judgment are the problem. They are not. They are merely the ripples of an ungoverned inner state. Your internal world is a slave to your external environment. When you feel safe, you function. When you feel threatened, you fail." Musashi wrote that you must make your everyday self your fighting self, and your fighting self your everyday self. Kenji had done the opposite. He had built a temple of technique on a foundation of sand. Takuan stood up, his eyes piercing Kenji. "More training will not save you, and a sharper sword will only hasten your end. We must rebuild the ground you stand on." To do that, Kenji had to face a terrifying reality. He was moving so fast through his own life that he was missing the only thing that could actually save him. And the first step to finding it was not a sword technique at all. It was a psychological trap set by the master. The following sunrise, Takuan issued an order that felt more like a riddle. "Today, you will do nothing except observe the microscopic gap between what happens to you and how you react." Kenji was a man of action, a warrior who lived by the speed of his draw. Yet, the monk commanded him to sit at the temple gate and simply watch the world pass. "Find the sliver of time between the stimulus and the surge of emotion," Takuan whispered, "and stay there." Kenji sat for 4 grueling hours. He discovered a disturbing truth. His mind was not his own. A sudden, sharp noise echoed from the courtyard, and his heart hammered against his ribs before he could even identify the source. A passing traveler glanced at him with a hint of disdain, and a wave of irritation flooded his chest before a single thought could form. He realized that every external event triggered a puppet string inside him. He was not the master of his house. He was a tenant in a storm of reflexes. When he reported this, Takuan nodded. "The space exists, Kenji, but you have spent your life moving so fast that you have blurred right past it. Think of it like a master swordsman who sees the strike before it is even launched." In Western psychology, Viktor Frankl noted that in this Specific space lies our ultimate power to choose our response, and in that response lies our freedom. If you can relate to this feeling of being a slave to your own reactions, comment a 1 below to let me know you are ready to reclaim your ground. The secret, Takuan explained, is to name the emotion the moment it surfaces. You do not say "I am angry," you say "there is anger arising." This simple shift in grammar is a surgical strike that separates the observer from the observed. Kenji practiced this for 30 days until the invisible became visible. But as his awareness grew, he hit a wall. Identifying the reaction was one thing, but stopping the internal damage was another. He was finding the space, but he was exhausted by the effort of holding the door shut against his own nature. He thought he was failing. But Takuan was about to reveal a dangerous paradox, one that proves everything you know about emotional control is completely backward. Kenji returned to the master with a heavy heart. He had successfully identified the space, but the effort required to remain there was suffocating. Every time a reaction arose, he had to strain to name it. The old impulses were still screaming, just delayed. This is the difference between effort and true training, Takuan said. You are using finite willpower to hold back a flood. Eventually, the dam will break. He then asked, "Do you know the true meaning of Fudoshin?" To Kenji, the immovable mind meant suppression, a mind like a stone that cannot be nudged by emotion. Takuan shook his head. That is the most dangerous misunderstanding of the warrior path. Suppression is a battle against yourself. A man fighting 2 battles, one with his opponent and one with his own fear, will always run out of fuel. True Fudoshin is not the absence of ripples, it is the nature of the water itself. When a stone is thrown into a still pond, ripples form. They spread, they move, and then they pass. The water does not try to stop the ripples, nor does it become the ripples. It remains water, returning to its natural stillness because that is its fundamental state. Musashi emphasized that your spirit should be like water, taking the shape of the container, but never losing its essence. Most men become the storm. They feel anger, and they become anger. The goal is to build the depth of the water so that the disturbance is felt but never takes purchase. Kenji realized he had been performing calmness rather than being calm. He asked how long it would take to reach this state. Longer than you want, but less than you fear, Takuan replied. But Kenji was about to step into a hidden trap. The peace he found inside the temple was a cheap illusion, and his real life was about to shatter it. Kenji had made strides. Within the temple walls, his inner state had stabilized. The gap between a startling event and his reaction was wider. The act of naming his emotions had become a lightning-fast reflex. He felt a sense of mastery and told Takuan he was ready to return to the sword. But the monk did not reach for a blade. Instead, he pointed to a simple bowl of rice. When you eat, where are you? Kenji realized the brutal truth. For months, he had treated peace like a uniform he only wore during battle. But at the breakfast table, his mind was a war zone, rehearsing future duels, dissecting yesterday failures, bleeding energy into ghosts that did not exist. Takuan's voice dropped. A man who only governs himself in a crisis is an actor. He has built a hollow shell that will shatter under real pressure because the foundation was never laid in the quiet, agonizing minutes of a Tuesday morning. Kenji went back to the mundane. He forced himself to feel the rough texture of the chopsticks. He listened to the sound of his own footsteps on the wooden floor. It was agonizingly slow. But day by day, his mind stopped living in the future. He stopped being a visitor in his own body. But peace in isolation means nothing. Takuan knew it was time for the ultimate test, a brutal crucible that would prove if Kenji had built a fortress or just a beautiful lie. 3 months later, the illusion of safety was stripped away. Kenji faced his old master, Yagyu Munenori. This was not practice, this was a crucible. Munenori attacked without warning, a blinding, brutal strike aimed directly at Kenji's center. Months ago, Kenji's soul would have contracted. Panic would have hijacked his nervous system. But this time seemed to dilate. In the microsecond before the wooden blade struck, the old reflex flared up, but Kenji did not become it. He watched the threat arise, stepped into the invisible space Takuan had taught him, and moved. Like water flowing around a stone, he parried. Not with frantic energy, but with cold, devastating precision. If you have ever felt your performance skyrocket once you stopped overthinking, comment a 2 below. Munenori lowered his sword. Before you arrived at the battlefield already fractured, the master whispered. Today, you brought the ground with you. Kenji had passed the physical test, but a much deeper transformation was beginning to ripple outward. He was starting to realize that mastering his inner state was not just a personal victory. It unlocked a silent psychological power that forced everyone around him to bend to his presence. Here is why. 6 months later, Kenji did not just fight differently, he existed differently. He was not louder, he was not aggressive. Yet, when he walked into a room, the atmosphere shifted. When an ungoverned man speaks to you, you can feel his anxiety. His eyes scan the room, his mind calculating how he looks, defending his ego, planning his next sentence. It is exhausting, but Kenji had nothing left to manage. Because his internal storm was dead, his entire terrifying reservoir of attention was laser-focused on whatever was in front of him. This is what the world mistakenly calls charisma. It is not a trick. It is the overwhelming gravity of a man who is entirely, relentlessly present. People bent to his silence because in a world of men fighting invisible wars in their heads, a man at peace is the most dangerous force in the room. By governing himself from the inside, he shifted the very atmosphere of his encounters. But Kenji could not stay in the temple forever. Before sending him back into a world designed to break him, Takuan handed him the final architecture of the inner ground, 3 exact, ruthless practices to survive. And the third one is the only reason he did not fail. 1 year later, Kenji prepared to leave the safety of the temple. Before sending him back into a world designed to break him, Takuan did not give him a blessing. He gave him the architecture of survival. 3 ruthless protocols. First, the witness. When the chaos hits, do not say I am angry. Say there is anger arising. Cut the cord between who you are and what you feel. You are the observer. The emotion is just data. Second, the anchor. When your mind spirals into the anxieties of tomorrow or the ghosts of yesterday, physically touch the nearest surface, wood, steel, stone. Feel it for 10 seconds. Your mind travels in time, your body can only exist right now. Force them back, together. And third, the 90-second protocol. The chemical burn of an emotion only lasts 90 seconds in your blood. If you stay mad longer than that, it is because you are choosing to feed it with a story. When provoked, shut your mouth. Wait 90 seconds. Let the poison burn out. Then, respond with lethal clarity. Kenji walked out of the temple gates. He was not a man without fear, but he was no longer its slave. He was the sky. The chaos was just the weather. If you are ready to master your own ground, comment, I am the sky, not the storm below. Hit subscribe to join our community of presence and purpose. But remember, while Kenji had the tools, the world is a relentless teacher. The real battle does not end here. It begins every time you step into a room where everyone is demanding that you break. And if you want to know the exact dark psychology behind why isolation either breaks a man or turns him into a weapon, click the video on your screen right now. I will see you there.